Our phones are the devices we use the most, and data shows that people hold on to the same phone for an average of 3 years. So making the right phone choice can save you years of frustration. And in nearly 15 years of working as a full-time phone reviewer and switching between dozens of phones each year, I thought it would be a good idea to share the phone buying mistakes I see most often, the ones I have made myself, and how to avoid making these mistakes altogether. So let's jump right into it, and the first mistake when buying a new phone has got to be about choosing the wrong size. The way many people think here is that bigger phones typically have a bigger battery, a larger screen, and maybe a slightly better camera. So even if they actually prefer using a smaller handset, many people go against their size preference, hoping that they will somehow get used to a larger phone because of all of those advantages. And while some people can get used to a bigger device, I have seen so many others breathe a sigh of relief when they finally switch back to a smaller phone that is actually easier to carry in a pocket, doesn't weigh as much, and is just easier to use. Now, the main argument for bigger phones has got to be their bigger battery. They get roughly 30% longer battery life, and apart from the larger screen, that is their main advantage. But most smaller phones these days will still last you through a day or even more, so it's not like they have poor battery life. So mistake number one, make sure you buy the phone size you actually enjoy using rather than focusing on one number on a spec sheet that ultimately may not matter all that much. Second, and the biggest mistake in my opinion, is people going for the base model of a phone just to save a little bit of money. And usually in 2025, that means that you're getting a phone with 128 gigabytes of storage. And this might seem enough at first, but if you take lots of photos and videos, it fills up very quickly. And that means that in just a few months, you will be constantly worrying about your phone offloading apps or about which cloud service you need to subscribe to back up all of your pictures. Now imagine living with that anxiety for the next 3 years. So in my experience, this is the most common mistake people make. So unless you really don't take many pictures, I think that the standard amount of storage you should be looking at is 256 gigabytes. Some people may also consider a model with even more storage, but most people should do good enough with 256 gigs. It is just so much easier living with a peace of mind knowing that you have enough storage and you don't have to look for a backup SSD drive or yet another upgrade to your iCloud plan. Mistake number 3 that I often see is people falling for some latest trend without being absolutely sure they need it. Now, we're lucky to have a lot of options when buying phones, but are you sure your next phone has to be a flip phone or a fold phone? While each of these new trendy form factors have their following, I have seen just as many people regret buying a flip phone instead of a traditional phone. Well, keep in mind that flip phones are still a bit more fragile than a typical phone, and you have one extra barrier of entry, having to flip them open every single time you want to use them. This might sound cool at first, but the fun factor wears off quickly. Big book-style foldable phones have another big downside. They are incredibly expensive, costing nearly $2,000, yet polls show that people still use the outer screen the vast majority of the time. Now, I am not saying you should avoid buying this type of phones altogether. I know many people perfectly happy with them, but they knew what they were getting into. So rather than be quick with the trigger, consider carefully if that latest trend is really something that you will enjoy using for the next 3 or 4 years. Mistake number 4 is making an on-the-spot decision based on advice from a store or carrier representative. Now, being in a store in a high-pressure environment is just not the right time to make a rushed decision. There are some very knowledgeable salespeople, but you should not forget that salespeople's goal is to sell you a phone, and sometimes that means they might withhold advice or just not be knowledgeable enough about all the pros and especially the cons of a phone as a seasoned reviewer would be. Phone innovation is slower and it's often not worth upgrading a device every 2 years, but you have to read independent reviews to learn that rather than trust a salesperson. And finally, mistake number 5 is buying a brand, not a need. So the best way to explain this would be with an example. So imagine you're in the market for a phone that is not too expensive and that you can use to record your runs or to use to record your cycling activities. If you're looking at iPhones, the most affordable one right now is the iPhone 16e at $600. So that's a reasonable price and you might be tempted to buy this phone, but once you do, you might be surprised to see that it does not support action mode video at all, so all of your running footage would not be stabilized. So rather than focusing on the brand you want, consider if there is a specific use case that is really important to you and do your research to ensure that your phone actually supports that. And as for the mistake I've made myself most often, that has got to be trying to use a bigger size phone despite all the inconvenience. It just never works out for me. But let me know if you agree with this list and what are the phone mistakes you've made or seen your friends and family make most often.